And in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on.
Well, that's right, New York Giants fans. We are going to live on. This is Tim, this New York Giants Straight Talk, powered by Online Big Blue LLC. Oh, we got the Daniel Jones injury to discuss. We have the future of the New York Football Giants. We just have so much to go over and just so much to ponder. Because if you look at Daniel Jones's career outside the injuries, this career is more and it's not. I should rephrase it. I was going to say it's more like a Greek tragedy or a Shakespearean tragedy, but it's not. It's more like a giant comedy. Alas, poor York, I knew him well, Felicio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. He took hatch-born me on his back 1,000 times. Of course, that's Hamlet. I don't remember the rest. But it's really a giant comedy. It's a giant comedy of errors going back to Gettleman, going back to Mara, going back and starting also now with Shane, and in some regards going in with Brian Daboll. I mean, you prepared yourself for the season so well that you have the great Tommy DeVito as your emergency quarterback. You thought so much of maybe drafting a quarterback, starting to bring in some young guys to cultivate. You got a 25-year-old quarterback who we're now going to see for the remainder 8 games of the season. It's just going to be awesome.
You were serious about that?
Of course I'm not serious about that, Tommy. That's actually not Tommy. That's Vinny from my cousin Vinny. But watching Giant Twitter implode is really the craziest of it all in Giant social media, because you have all these people, we failed Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones never had an opportunity. Daniel Jones had 5 years. Sorry. Any other quarterback that had Daniel Jones's stats over this period of time would have been gone. Can we just really be honest? Outside of his rookie season, last year was his best year, and that was 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 3,000 yards. And if you extrapolate 2021 to 2020 and take out the injuries, he's probably going to be right along those lines of 3,000 plus yards, 15 touchdowns, and anywhere between 5 to 15 interceptions, 5 to 10 interceptions. These are Mitchell Trubisky numbers. And we all know Mitchell Trubisky, when he got let go of the Bears, had a hard time finding a large offer anywhere, and he didn't get one. He had to go to Pittsburgh. These aren't numbers of a quarterback that you look at and go, ooh. For his career, 12,000 yards, 12,500 yards, 62 touchdowns, 40 interceptions. And people will point out the rushing numbers and all these wonderful things, but that's great and all, but it's at the end of the day, it's wins. And how has your quarterback progressed and maturated? When Joe Shane got off, the biggest problem Joe Shane and Brian Daboll ran into was the 2022 season. The Giants went beyond expectations. What were they, 3-5-1 in the last 9 games? In the second half of the season, they kind of collapsed, but they had such a good half. They had those 6 wins in the first half of the season that they were able to make the playoffs. And that ability to make the playoffs really screwed their plan. Because then they were looking at the salary cap, and then they were saying, well, we're kind of in a situation still where we still have a little bit in the salary cap purgatory because of some of these bad contracts, and bringing in Darren Waller and doing a few other things. And I said it back in week 2. And again, like I said, I always get told I have no idea what I'm talking about. I said the Giants are going to run out of cap space by the middle of this season. And that happened. And the reason Leonard Williams got traded wasn't because of the fact they were trying to get rid of Leonard Williams. They probably wanted to keep him for the rest of this year. But the reason he got traded is because they needed cap space. They had $500,000 in cap space left. So they sent Leonard Williams to Seattle. They're paying most of his salary, but they freed up $9 million in cap space and got a 2 and a 5. Which is great, but you're also basically, to Xavier McKinney's point, in some regards, you're not really waving the flag for the season, but it's just a little suspect that you're trading one of your team captains basically for cap space. And this was something that anyone who follows the league or anyone that follows cap space could easily see the Giants were heading down that primrose path. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that you went out and gave Daniel Jones that contract, which in turn made you tag Saquon Barkley. So you were giving Saquon Barkley guaranteed money right off the bat. $10 million off the salary cap right there. And yeah, you saved money on Daniel Jones' contract this year, but you go into next year, there's nothing you could do about it because you got a, $68 million cap hit if you do anything with Daniel Jones. And now, coming off this injury, we have to look. And I said this when they signed Daniel Jones. Did a whole video about it. You can look at this as being a short-term 3-year deal. And I said that if anything goes wrong, if he regresses, which he has, 900 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, or he gets hurt, this deal is going to look god-awful because you are going to be stuck in purgatory with this contract till 2024. And 2024, you still have a $20+ million dead cap number for Daniel Jones. And he's got an injury kicker as well in there in his salary. So at the end of the day, you overpaid for a guy that had one good season. You talk to people in the league. You talk to people outside the Giant bubble. We've said this before. They were shocked they gave Daniel Jones that contract. And I love it because everyone kept telling me, just look at it, Tim. Just look at it, Tim. Just look at it, Tim. I don't need to look at it. I did look at it. It was a bad deal. It was a bad deal for a quarterback who hadn't put up anything substantial in 4 years. Shane was kind of over a barrel in regards because of the fact that he was so low in the draft because of making the playoffs. There was no way he could move on from Daniel Jones, keep Saquon Barkley, and draft a quarterback. There was no way possible. A lot of us smart fans saw it and we questioned it. And now we're sitting there again looking at the likes of Tommy DeVito, Matt Barkley, kind of wondering where the season went. I said it before. We weren't making the playoffs this year. I never gave a win prediction because I had no idea, but I just knew by the number of 1-point games we had played, the number of freak plays we won on last year, the way we finished the second half of the season, this was not a playoff team. The defense plays well in spots, but it still gives up bunches of points, 30, 40, 30 points. You have some collective talent on the team, but I don't think you have a cohesive unit. And then you have Xavier McKinney talking again after the game saying, hey, well, listen, nobody's listening to the captains. Nobody's listening to leadership here. Sometimes people don't listen to leaders. They just follow leaders. That's why they call the game follow the leader. Because sometimes you don't have to tell someone you're a leader. You lead by action. And you don't have to keep telling people, well, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. Because we could see it on the field. We could see this. So we've turned this into a comedy of errors, starting with drafting Daniel Jones 6 overall. You don't blame Daniel Jones for being taken 6 overall. We've told the story before that when I was having coffee the morning of the draft, and they said that there was a team that was interested in Daniel Jones. And they go back for the commercial and they say, and we'll come back for the commercial to tell you who the team was. And I sat there and I said to myself, please don't say it's the Giants. Please don't say it's the Giants. Please don't say it's the Giants. And of course they said it's the New York Giants. So you went out and drafted this kid. He had a good season under Pat Shurmur. The problem with that good season under Pat Shurmur is Pat Shurmur, for all of his faults as a head coach and just maybe as a person, because he does come off like an asshole like me, but I'm a lovable asshole. He understands the ability of his quarterback. He understood what he had in Daniel Jones. He made Daniel Jones a one-read quarterback. He understood what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the field in half for Daniel Jones, give him a deep options, I'm going to give him a deep, and I'm going to give him an intermediate option. The second option is to run. And I'm going to cut the field in half. They did the same thing with Rick Meyer all the way back in Seattle. And I think he was the rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year. And they did the same thing to Daniel Jones. The only problem is when you do that, you win games and you make him look good for a season, but once the league gets film, that's it. So then you had 2 more years sitting there under Jason Garrett, and everybody was like, "Wow, look at this! He's holding Daniel Jones back." No, he was doing what he was told to do by the coaching staff, which was to mitigate the turnovers from Daniel Jones and don't let Daniel Jones beat you. So we had 2 years of that hearing how Jason Garrett was so terrible. But then we bring in the genius, Brian Daboll, offensive genius, and the boy wonder, Mike Kafka. And we look at it and we say, okay, well, you know what? It's going to be a great season. So you barely throw for 3,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. And it's the same, like I said, if you extrapolate the 2 Jason Garrett seasons, minus the injury, it's going to be basically the same season. So it's Mitchell Trubisky. And I said this before, as soon as that ink on that contract dried, for that $160 million deal. That was no longer Dave Gettleman's quarterback. That was now Joe Schoen's quarterback. And for all the people that are yelling to fire Schoen and Dable, oh my God, just shut up. Just shut up, please. You're not firing them. You can't keep continuously getting rid of general managers and head coaches because things go wrong. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. You got to give someone an opportunity to build something. Schoen has made some questionable moves in the draft. Schoen has made some questionable trades. Schoen has made some questionable free agency moves, and you get a little concerned that as soon as you're going to turn over a large portion of cap space to him next year on a second year of he's rebuilding within a rebuild. So you have to question Schoen, but you can't get rid of him. Same thing, you can't get rid of Brian Daboll unless he does something to force his way out to get back into Buffalo if Sean McDermott gets fired, or if he forces his way over to the Chargers. I think my biggest issue is the fact that people don't get. They got some fans, I should say. They got spoiled with Eli Manning because Eli Manning was here forever. Same with Phil Simms. Phil Simms had a good run as well, but Eli Manning was the modicum of consistency. Always played, always suit up. But then I was thinking, the problem is a lot of these fans don't understand that you don't always hit on that franchise quarterback. You don't always, that guy you draft number one overall, you don't always hit on him. Look at Dave Brown taking number one overall in the supplemental draft. Look at now Daniel Jones. But if you go back to the Annals of Giants history, I always talk about 76 being my first season with the Giants. You had Craig Morton and Norm Snead start. Next year you had Pisarcik and what's his name? I think it was Jerry Goldstein. Or Goldstein. Then you had Pisarcik again, Jerry and Randy Dean. Then you finally went into Phil Simms era in 79, but it was still Phil Simms and Pisarcik because of injury. Then it's 80, it was Phil Simms and Scott Bruner. Then it was Phil Simms and Bruner. Then Bruner played the entire 82 strike shortened season, but then next year you had Bruner and Jeff Rutledge. Then finally you had 3 years of Phil Simms, but then you went into Phil Simms, Jeff Rutledge, Mike Bush, and Jim, I think it was Karosha. I can't remember his name. He started one game in 87. Oh, that was the, the strike shortened year, so he was the strike quarterback. Then you go to Phil Simms and Hostetler for 4 straight years. And then you go Hostetler, Phil Simms, Kent Graham. Then you have Phil Simms for 1 year. Then you go into the Dave Brown, Kent Graham eras. Then you got 2 years of Brown. Then you got Cannell and Brown, Cannell and Kent Graham. Then you have Kent Graham and Kerry Collins. And then going into the early 2000s up to 2023, from 2020, you have Kerry Collins and Jesse Palmer. And then finally in 2004, you have Kurt Warner and Eli Manning. You see in Giant history, we could even go back further, that you don't always hit on your quarterbacks. Sometimes you go into the quarterback desert. Look at some regards in reference to the Jets. You know, some people say that Chad Pennington was the last great Jet quarterback, our last really good Jet quarterback. So to sit there and have this delusion that we failed Daniel Jones, look at all the other quarterbacks that were ahead of him who also failed. Did we fail all of them? Did we fail Kent Graham and Dave Brown and Danny Cannell and Kerry Collins and Hostetler and Mike Bush and Jeff Rutledge and Scott Bruner and Pisarcik and Randy Dean and Norm Snead and Craig Morton? Did Fran Tarkenton, even going back to the early 70s, did we fail all of them? No, you don't always hit on something. In this microwave society now where everything has to be immediate and everything has to be an immediate gratification, everything has to be right. It's not a perfect world. The draft is not a perfect science. If we were in the outside looking in at this Giant organization, and let's say we were Philly fans or Cowboy fans or hell Raider fans, and we saw what we've had the last couple of years with Daniel Jones, people laugh at us. If you take the name Daniel Jones and you put it on the Eagles and you have the same identical record with the Eagles, Daniel Jones, we would look at this and go, why do they still have this guy? But thank God they do, because at least it's 2 division wins. It's a tragedy of errors by this entire organization. And we've had to sit through this now, going back to 2019. And hell, look at Daniel Jones. Is Daniel Jones, Eli Manning, Daniel Jones, Colt McCoy, Daniel Jones, Mike Glennon, Jake Fromm, Daniel Jones, Davis Webb, Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor, and now it's going to be soon to be and coming soon, the Danny DeVito show.
You were serious about that?
I got to be serious about it because I got nothing left. And I just love it because Shane is in a rebuild within a rebuild. So you can feel bad for Daniel Jones. You could feel bad for the injury. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But you know what? Injuries happen in football. Injuries happen in life. I think the venerable James Williams said it best. You know, we paid Daniel Jones almost $120 million over his career. So I'm not going to feel bad for him in reference to that, because we've said it before. Some ways he stole that money. But you feel bad for him as an athlete. You feel bad for him as a person. Then you feel bad for the Giant organization because of the fact that they are going to be stuck with this. And then you have the people that are like, well, the DJ haters wanted this to happen. No, the DJ haters didn't want anything to happen. They didn't want Dan Jones to go down with an injury. We just wanted to move on from a quarterback in this draft because we have seen this. We have looked at this from afar, and we understand.
Do you see the light? What light? Have you seen the light?
Yes! Yes! Jesus H. Goddamn Christ! I have seen the light!
And you hope that's what some fans are. Because there were too many fans out there that flip-flopped the pendulum and used the pendulum on Daniel Jones for the last 4 years. He's so great. He sucks. I owe him an apology. He's so great now. He sucks again. Like I've said before, I tried to take the emotion out of this show in reference to, you know, being a fan. Because you want to know why.
You can do it! Oh, no! We suck again!
That's the pendulum of Giant fans. That's the pendulum of people on Twitter. That's the pendulum of people in social media. They don't get it. Injuries happen. How many times, for dear Lord, did Phil Simms go down with an injury? How many seasons, oh Lord, was Phil Simms hurt? If you literally want to go back and look at this and talk about it, I know most people don't. Phil Simms was hurt in 80. He was hurt in 81. He was hurt in all of 82. He was hurt in 83. He was drafted in 79. He didn't play a full season until 1984, where he threw for over 4,000 yards and was the first Giant quarterback to ever do that. Injuries happen. It's part of the league. And the way they cultivated quarterbacks in the 70s, 80s, and parts of the 90s isn't like they do now. Back then, you had first round picks that sat sometimes for like 3 years. Now it's an immediate play because of the salary cap, because of the contract. The Giants need to look into the draft and find a quarterback. Plain and simple. Nothing else to talk about. They need to move on from Daniel Jones. They're gonna lose almost $80+ million in salary cap over the next 2 seasons, but they're gonna have to do it because you cannot go into year 6 of a guy coming off major injuries and say we still don't know what we have. We got a big live stream today at 6:45, so make sure you tune in for that. And as always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to ring that bell because you want to know why. That'd be awesome.